another platform so that we can say hello and welcome and forehead kisses to our fishies on the Red app. Hello, my sweet fishies. Okay. And let's make sure that we get this going. All right. It looks like that is working. Cool. All right. Oop. Oh, this might be a problem. So, a problem that might come up later is my portable monitor. I have luckily gotten a replacement. However, my portable monitor has been kind of having a bit of a blackout. Hello, Vault. Normal? I would say normal to wholesome. More wholesome. You should do ASMR with that voice? Well, I've got good news for you. There's something called vocal ASMR, and I sit here and I read to you. So, put a 1 in chat if you are ready to listen to chapter 11 of Frankenstein. I didn't even finish talking and Nuke Boss said 1. Nuke Boss is ready. We do also have a puzzle for those interested in solving a puzzle while I read. What is the story so far? So, Frankenstein is a dude, a guy. He's just a guy. And he's got this strange family that has kind of adopted a few kids over time, and he found a fascination in philosophy, and he went off to study, and he realized that in his studies nobody has really dove deep into the philosophy and morality and the potential of bringing together what did I just of putting together like body parts and reanimating life. And then he did it, and he succeeded. And then he greatly regretted it from the moment that his creation came to life. And he ensued was in so much shock and dismay and disgust and depression, and he made himself physically ill for an extended period of time. And it wasn't for, I think, what seemed like 2 months until he was able to be normal again, albeit he was very, very, very anxious. But then he gets a letter from home saying, hey, your little brother was unfortunately taken back to the sky. And there's a murderer somewhere. And he rushes back home. And he comes to the conclusion that it must have been his creature that he reanimated. It does continue on. There's some other things that happen. But what brings us here in this very moment is that Frankenstein himself, again, was off traveling. And who does he come across in the mountains of all places? Is his creature. And his creature comes to tell his tale, which starts now. Chapter 11. It is with inconsiderable difficulty that I remember the original era of my being. All the events of that period appear confused and indistinct. A strange multiplicity of sensations seized me, and I saw, felt, heard, and smelt at the same time. And it was, indeed, a long time before I learned to distinguish between the operations of my various senses. By degrees, I remember, a stronger light pressed upon my nerves, so that I was obliged to shut my eyes. Darkness then came over me, and troubled me. But hardly had I felt this when, by opening my eyes, as I now suppose, the light poured in upon me again. I walked and, I believe, descended, but I presently found a great alteration in my senses. Before, dark and opaque bodies had surrounded me, impervious to my touch or sight. But now I found that I could wander on at liberty, with no obstacles which I could not either surmount or avoid. The light became more and more oppressive to me, and the heat wearying me as I walked, I sought a place where I could receive shade. This was the forest near Ingolstadt, and here I lay by the side of a brook, resting from my fatigue until I felt tormented by hunger and thirst. This roused me from my nearly dormant state, and I ate some berries which I found hanging on the trees or lying on the ground. I slaked my thirst at the brook, and then lying down, I was overcome with sleep. It was dark when I awoke. I felt cold, also, and half frightened, as it were, instinctively, finding myself so desolate. Before I had quitted your apartment, on a sensation of cold, I had covered myself with some clothes, but these were insufficient to secure me from the dews of the night. I was a poor, helpless, miserable wretch. I knew, and could distinguish, nothing. But feeling pain invade me on all sides, I sat down and wept. Soon a gentle light stole over the heavens and gave me a sensation of pleasure. I started up and beheld a radiant form rise from among the trees. The moon. I gazed with a kind of wonder. It moved slowly, but it enlightened my path, and I again went out in search of berries. I was still cold when under one of the trees I found a huge cloak, which I covered myself and sat down upon the ground. No distinct ideas occupied my mind. All was confused. I felt light and hunger and thirst and darkness. Innumerable sounds rang in my ears, and on all sides various scents saluted me. The only object that I could distinguish was the bright moon, and I fixed my eyes on that with pleasure. Several changes of day and night passed, and the orb of night had greatly lessened when I began to distinguish my senses from each other. I gradually saw plainly the clear stream that supplied me with drink and the trees that shaded me with their foliage. I was delighted when I first discovered that a pleasant sound, which had often saluted my ears, proceeded from the throats of the little winged animals who had often intercepted the light from my eyes. I began also to observe, with greater accuracy, the forms that surrounded me and to perceive the boundaries of the radiant roof of light which canopied me. Sometimes I tried to imitate the pleasant songs of the birds, but was unable. Sometimes I wished to express Sometimes I wished to express my sensations in my own mode, but the uncouth and inarticulate sounds which broke from me frightened me into a silence again. The moon had disappeared from the night, and again, with a lessened form, showed itself, while I still remained in the forest. My sensations had by this time become distinct, and my mind received every day additional ideas. My eyes became accustomed to the light and to perceive objects in their right forms. I distinguished the insect from the herb, and by degrees, one herb from the other. I found that the sparrow uttered none but harsh notes, whilst those of the blackbird and thrush were sweet and enticing. One day, when I was oppressed by cold, I found a fire which had been left by some wandering beggars, and was overcome with delight at the warmth I experienced from it. In my joy, I thrust my hand into the live embers, but quickly drew it out again with a cry of pain. How strange, I thought, that the same cause should produce such opposite effects. I examined the materials of the fire, and to my joy found it to be composed of wood. I quickly collected some branches, but they were wet and would not burn. I was pained at this and sat still, watching the operation of the fire. The wet wood which I had placed near the heat dried and itself became inflamed. I reflected on this, and by touching the various branches I discovered the cause and busied myself in collecting a great quantity of wood, that I might dry it and have a plentiful that I might dry it and have a plentiful supply of fire. When the night came on and brought sleep with it, I was in the greatest fear lest my fire should be extinguished. I covered it carefully with dry wood and leaves and placed wet branches upon it. And then, spreading my cloak, I lay on the ground and sank into sleep. It was morning when I awoke, and my first care was to visit the fire. I uncovered it, and a gentle breeze quickly fanned it into a flame. I observed this also and contrived a fan of branches, which roused the embers when they were nearly extinguished. When night came again, I found with pleasure that the fire gave light as well as heat, and that discovery of this element was useful to me in my food, for I found some of the offals that the travelers had left had been roasted, and tasted much more savory than the berries I gathered from the trees. I tried, therefore, to dress my food in the same manner, placing it on the live embers. I found that the berries were spoiled by this operation and the nuts and roots much improved. Drink water. Food. Food, however, became scarce, and I often spent the whole day searching in vain for a few acorns to assuage the pangs of hunger. When I found this, I resolved to quit the place that I had hitherto inhabited, to seek for one where the few wants I experienced would be more easily satisfied. In this emigration I exceedingly lamented the loss of the fire which I had obtained through accident, and knew not how to reproduce it. I gave several hours to the serious consideration of this difficulty, but I was obliged to relinquish all attempt to supply it, and wrapping myself up in my cloak, I struck across the wood towards the setting sun. I passed 3 days in these rambles, and at length discovered the open country. A great fall of snow had taken place the night before, and the fields were one uniform white. The appearance was disconsolate, and I found my feet chilled by the cold, damp surface that covered the ground. It was about 7 in the morning, and I longed to obtain food and shelter. At length I perceived a small hut on a rising ground, which had doubtless been built for the convenience of some shepherd. This was a new sight to me, and I examined the structure with great curiosity. Finding the door open, I entered. An old man sat in it near a fire over which he was preparing his breakfast. He turned on hearing a noise. Over which he was preparing his breakfast. He turned on hearing the noise, and perceiving me, shrieked loudly, and quitting the hut, ran across the field with the speed of which his dilapidated form hardly appeared capable. His appearance, different from any I had ever seen before, and his flight somewhat surprised me. But I was enchanted by the appearance of the hut. Here the snow and rain could not penetrate. The ground was dry, and it presented to me then as exquisite and divine a retreat as pandemonium appeared to the demons of hell after their sufferings in the lake of fire. I greedily devoured the remnants of the shepherd's breakfast, which consisted of bread, cheese, milk, and wine. The latter, however, I did not like. Then, overcome by fatigue, I lay down among some straw and fell asleep. It was noon when I awoke, and allured by the warmth of the sun which shone brightly on the white ground, I determined to recommence my travels, and depositing the remains of the peasant's breakfast in a wallet I found, I proceeded across the fields for several hours, until at sunset I arrived at a village. How miraculous did this appear! The huts, the neater cottages, and stately houses engaged my admiration by turns. The vegetables in the garden, the milk and cheese that I saw placed at the windows of some of the cottages allured my appetite. One of the best of these I entered, but I had hardly placed my foot within the door before the children shrieked and one of the women fainted. The whole village was roused. Some fled, some attacked me, until grievously bruised by stones and many other kinds of missile weapons, I escaped to the open country and fearfully took refuge in a low hovel, quite bare, and making a wretched appearance after the palaces I had beheld in the village. This hovel, however, joined a cottage of a neat and pleasant appearance, and after my late dearly bought experience I dared not enter it. My place of refuge was constructed of wood, but so low that I could with difficulty sit upright in it. No wood, however, was placed on the earth which formed the floor, but it was dry. And although the wind entered it by innumerable chinks, I found it agreeable asylum I found it an agreeable asylum from the snow and rain. Here, then, I retreated to lay down, happy to have found a shelter, however miserable, from the inclemency, however miserable from the inclemency of the season, and still more from the barbarity of man. As soon as morning dawned, I crept from my kennel. That I might view the adjacent cottage and discover if I could remain in the habitation I had found. It was situated against the back of the cottage and surrounded on the sides, which were exposed by a pigsty and a clear pool of water. One part was open, and by that I crept in, but now I covered every crevice by which I might be perceived with stones and wood, yet in such a manner that I might move them on occasion to pass out. All the light I enjoyed came through the sty, and that was sufficient for me. Having thus arranged, drink water. Having thus arranged my dwelling and carpeted it with clean straw, I retired, for I saw the figure of a man at a distance, and I remembered too well my treatment the night before to trust myself in his power. I had first, however, provided for my substance for that day by a loaf of coarse bread, which I purloined, and a cup with which I could drink more conveniently than from my hand of the pure water which flowed by my retreat. The floor was little raised, so that it was kept dry. The floor was little raised, so that it was kept perfectly dry, and by its vicinity to the chimney of the cottage, it was tolerably warm. Being thus provided, I resolved to reside in this hovel until something should occur which might alter my determination. It was indeed a paradise compared to the bleak forest, my former residence. The rain dropping branches and dank earth. I ate my breakfast with pleasure and was about to remove a plank to procure myself a little water when I heard a step, and looking through a small chink, I beheld a young creature, with a pail on her head, passing before my hovel. The girl was young and of gentle demeanour, unlike what I have since found cottagers and farmhouse servants to be. Yet she was meanly dressed, a coarse blue petticoat, and a linen jacket, being her only garb. Her fair hair was plaited but not adorned. She looked patient, yet sad. I lost sight of her, and in about a quarter of an hour she returned bearing the pail, which was now partly filled with milk. As she walked along, seemingly incommoded by the burden, a young man met her, whose countenance expressed a deeper despondence. Uttering few sounds with an air of melancholy, he took the pail from her head and bore it to the cottage. He took the pail from her head and bore it to the cottage himself. She followed, and they disappeared. Presently, I saw the young man again with some tools in his hand cross the field behind the cottage, and the girl was also busied, sometimes in the house and sometimes in the yard. On examining my dwelling, I found that one of the windows of the cottage had formerly occupied a part of it, but the panes had been filled up with wood. In one of these, a small and almost imperceptible chink through which the eye could just penetrate. Through this crevice, a small room was visible, whitewashed and clean, but very bare of furniture. In one corner, near a small fire, sat an old man, leaning his head on his hands in a disconsolate attitude. The young girl was occupied in arranging the cottage, but presently she took something out of a drawer which employed her hands, and she sat down beside the old man, who, taking up an instrument, began to play and to produce sounds sweeter than the voice of the thrush or the nightingale. It was a lovely sight, even to me, poor wretch who had never beheld aught beautiful before. The silver hair and benevolent countenance of the aged cottager won my reverence, while the gentle manners of the girl enticed my love. He played a sweet, mournful air, which I perceived drew tears from my eyes of his amiable...
Thank you, Frog.
He played a sweet, mournful air, from which I perceived drew tears from the eyes of his amiable companion, of which the old man took no notice, until she sobbed audibly. He then pronounced a few sounds, and the fair creature, leaving her work, knelt at his feet. He raised her and smiled with such kindness and affection that I felt sensations of a peculiar and overpowering nature. They were a mixture of pain and pleasure, such as I had never before experienced, either from hunger or cold, warmth or food, and I withdrew from the window, unable to bear these emotions. Soon after this young man returned. The young man returned, bearing on his shoulders a load of wood. The girl met him at the door, helped to relieve him of his burden, and taking some of the fuel into the cottage, placed it on the fire. Then she and the youth went apart into a nook of the cottage, and he showed her a large loaf and a piece of cheese. She seemed pleased and went into the garden for some roots and plants, which she placed in water, and then upon the fire. She afterwards continued her work, whilst the young man went into the... Oh, wait. You guys reminded me, I need to change... can someone send me a reminder in the Discord server to update the bot? We are reading Frankenstein. Or, also known as, the modern Prometheus. Don't forget to drink water. I hope you're enjoying the reading. Thank you for the stream streaks. Thank you for the follows. I appreciate you. Where was I? Oh, cracked my neck. Thank you, Nuke Boss. Thank you, Anxiety. Then she and the youth went apart into a nook of the cottage, and he showed her a large loaf and a piece of cheese. She then seemed pleased and went into the garden for some roots and plants, which she placed in water, and then upon the fire. She afterwards continued her work, whilst the man went into the garden and appeared busily employed in digging and pulling up roots. After he had been employed thus about an hour, the young woman joined him and they entered the cottage together. The old man had, in the meantime, been pensive, but on the appearance of his companions, he assumed a more cheerful air, and they sat down to eat. The meal was quickly dispatched. The young woman was again occupied in arranging the cottage. The old man walked before the cottage in the sun for a few minutes, leaning on the arm of the youth. Nothing could exceed in beauty the contrast between these two excellent creatures. One was old, with the silver hairs and countenance beaming with benevolence and love. The younger was slight and graceful in his figure, and his features were molded by the finest symmetry. Yet his eyes and attitude expressed the utmost sadness and despondency. The old man returned to the cottage, and the youth, with tools different from those he had used in the morning, directed his steps across the fields. Night quickly shut in, but to my extreme wonder, I found that the cottagers had a means of prolonging light by the use of tapers, and was delighted to find that the setting of the sun did not put an end to the pleasure I experienced in watching my human neighbors. In the evening, the young girl and her companion were employed in various occupations which I did not understand, and the old man again took up the instrument which produced the divine sounds that had enchanted me in the morning. So soon as he had finished, the youth began not to play, but to utter sounds that were monotonous, and neither resembling the harmony of the old man's instrument nor the songs of the birds. I since found that he read aloud, but at that time I knew nothing of the science of words or letters. I since found that he read aloud, but at the time I knew nothing of the science of letters. I knew nothing of the science of words or letters. The family, after having been thus occupied for a short time, extinguished their lights and retired, as I conjectured, to rest. That was the end of chapter 11.
Pookie, thank you for the 3-stream streak. Shinigami Zero, thank you for the stream streak. The 3-stream streak.
Put a 1 in chat if you would like me to continue with chapter 12. This is also an opportunity for me to take a breath and a drink of water. Nuke Boss is ready. Cadmium is ready. Don't forget the stretch. Oh yes. Stretching and posture checking is very important. No shrimp posture is allowed. If you are new here, hello, my name is Steph, and I read books and stories on stream. If you are an author, or if you know an author that would like their book promoted, I would love to talk with you. Please send me a message. If you would like to share your writing on the internet, we have a Discord server in which you can send your writing and share it with us. If you are curious, I am live on all platforms. I apparently am not allowed to say the names of the platforms, otherwise the algorithms will take me out back and tell me to think of the bunnies, but we are here. I am available on all platforms. Hello, hi. You're so cute. You're cute little fishies. Well, it seems like I put everyone to sleep. I only see 2 ones. The red, the purple, and the clock. Ah, they call it the clock app. They call it the clock app. I guess that makes sense. I say the crazy platform because I get the craziest things in that chat. It's kind of funny. Frog is ready, Shinigami is ready, Mats is ready, Chris is ready. Chris, please drive safely. I'm glad that I can give you something to listen to. Well, yeah, I get it, Nukebot. Hi, King. Hi. Hi. It's good to see you. You can't see me. People can have cute personalities, you know. King, I hope that you are doing well. Don't forget to drink water. You have finally recovered. I would give you a round of applause, but I don't have hands. Good job. Good job, you're recovered. I'm so happy. I'm glad that you're feeling better. Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more people. 6 more people are ready to continue reading. And thus, we continue reading. 6. Dova is ready. There is a puzzle as well, if anybody is interested in the puzzle. It looks like we've got 1 person working on it. Yes, I have made adjustments, so I am a cutie pie. I am a cutie pie in 2D. If you're new here, I am live on Thursday, Friday, and Saturdays. I am in the Eastern time zone. And if you want to listen to more of my voice or my readings, I have all of my previous live streams on YouTube in the live tab. I do also have edited YouTube videos if you would like to listen to something that doesn't have all of the talking and whatever in between. Let's continue. Chapter 2. No, this is not Chapter 2. I said that with so much confidence. Chapter 12. I lay on my straw, but I could not sleep. I thought of the correspondences. Wow, that is extremely wrong. I lay on my straw, but I could not sleep. I thought of the occurrences of the day. What chiefly struck me was the gentle manners of these people, and that I longed to join them. I longed to join them, but dared not. I remembered too well the treatment I had suffered the night before from the barbarous villagers and resolved, whatever course of conduct I might hereafter think it right to pursue, that for the present I would remain quietly in my hovel, watching and endeavoring to discover the motives which influenced their actions. The cottagers arose the next morning before the sun. The young woman arranged the cottage and prepared the food, and the youth departed after the first meal. This day was passed in the same routine as that which preceded it. The young woman was constantly employed out of doors. The young man was constantly employed out of doors, and the girl in various laborious occupations within. The old man, whom I soon perceived to be blind, employed his leisure hours on his instrument or in contemplation. Nothing could exceed the love and respect which the younger cottagers exhibited towards their venerable companion. They performed towards him every little office of affection and duty with gentleness, and he rewarded them by his benevolent smiles. They were not entirely happy. The young man and his companion often went apart and appeared to weep. I saw no cause for their unhappiness, but I was deeply affected by it. If such lovely creatures were miserable, it was less strange that I, an imperfect and solitary being, should be wretched. Yet, why were these gentle beings unhappy? They possessed a delightful house, for such it was in my eyes, and every luxury. They had a fire to warm them when chill, and delicious viands. What the fuck is this word?
Oh my god, my immersion, it's broken.
Viand? Viand. Why? It sounds southern. Clip that? They had a fire to warm them when chill, and delicious viands when hungry. They were dressed in excellent clothes, and still more they enjoyed one another's company and speech, interchanging each day looks of affection and kindness. What did their tears imply? Did they really express pain? I was at first unable to solve these questions, but perpetual attention and time explained to me many appearances which were at first enigmatic. A considerable period elapsed before I discovered one of the causes of the uneasiness of this amiable family. It was poverty, and they suffered that evil in a very distressing degree. Their nourishment consisted entirely of the vegetables of their garden and milk from one cow, which gave very little during the winter, when its masters could scarcely procure food to support it. They often, I believe, suffered the pangs of hunger very poignantly. Very poignantly, especially the two younger cottagers. For several times they placed food before the old man when they reserved none for themselves. This trait of kindness moved me sensibly. I had been accustomed during the night to steal a part of their store for my own consumption, but when I found that in doing this I inflicted pain on the cottagers, I abstained and satisfied myself on berries, nuts, and roots which I gathered from a neighboring wood. I discovered, also, another means through which I was enabled to assist their labors. I found that the youth spent a great part of each day in collecting wood for the family fire. During the night I often took his tools, the use of which I quickly discovered, and brought home firing sufficient for the consumption of several days. I remember the first time I did this, the young woman, when she opened the door in the morning, appeared greatly astonished on seeing a great pile of wood on the outside. She uttered some words in a loud voice, and the youth joined her, who also expressed surprise. I observed with pleasure that he did not go to the forest that day, and spent it in repairing the cottage and cultivating the garden. By degrees, I made a discovery of still greater moment. I found that these people possessed a method of communicating their experience and feelings to one another by articulate sounds. I perceived that the sounds they spoke sometimes produced pleasure or pain, smiles or sadness in the minds and countenances of the hearers. This was indeed a godlike science, and I ardently desired to become acquainted with it, but I was baffled in every attempt I made for this purpose. Their pronunciation was quick, and the words they uttered not having any apparent connection with visible objects, I was unable to discover any clue by which I could unravel the mystery of their reference. By great application, however, and after having remained during the space of several revolutions of the moon in my hovel, I discovered the names that were given to some of the most familiar objects of discourse. I learned and applied the words fire, milk, bread, and wood. I learned also the names of the cottages themselves. The young... Drink water.
Wow.
Thank you, Wraith. Thank you. I learned also the names of the cottages themselves. The youth and his companion had each of them several names, but the old man had only one, which was father. The girl was called sister or Agatha, and the youth Felix, brother or son. I cannot describe the delight I felt when I learned the ideas appropriated to each of these sounds, and was able to pronounce them. I distinguished several other words without being able, as yet, to understand or apply them, such as good, dearest, unhappy. I spent the winter in this manner. The gentle reminders of beauty of the cottages greatly endeared them to me. When they were unhappy, I felt depressed. When they rejoiced, I sympathized in their joys. I saw few human beings beside them, and if any other happened to enter the cottage, their harsh manners and rude gait only enhanced to me the superior accomplishments of my friends. The old man, I could perceive, often endeavored to encourage his children, as sometimes I found them that he called them to cast off their melancholy. He would talk in a cheerful accent, with an expression of goodness that bestowed pleasure even upon me. Agatha listened with respect, her eyes sometimes filled with tears, which she endeavored to wipe away unperceived, but I generally found that her countenance and tone were more cheerful after having listened to the exhortations of her father. It was not thus with Felix.
He was the saddest of the group, and even to my unpracticed senses he appeared to have suffered more deeply than his friends. But if his countenance was more sorrowful, his voice was more cheerful than that of his sister, especially when he addressed the old man. I could mention innumerable instances which, although slight, marked the dispositions of these amiable cottagers. In the midst of poverty and want, Felix carried with pleasure to his sister the first little white flower that peeped out from beneath the snowy ground. Earlier in the morning, before she had risen, he cleared away the snow that obstructed her path to the milk house, drew water from the well, and brought the wood from the outhouse, where, to his perpetual astonishment, he found his store always replenished by an invisible hand. In the day, I believe, he worked sometimes for a neighboring farmer, because he often went forth and did not return until dinner, yet brought no wood with him. At other times he worked in the garden, but as there was little to do in the frosty season, he read to the old man and Agatha. This reading had puzzled me extremely at first, but by degrees I discovered that he uttered many of the same sounds when he read as when he talked. I conjectured, therefore, that he found on the paper signs for speech, which he understood, and I ardently longed to comprehend these also. But how was that possible when I did not even understand the sounds for which they stood as signs? I improved, however, sensibly in this science, but not sufficiently to follow up any kind of conversation. Although I applied my whole mind to the endeavor, for which I easily perceived that, although did I read this sentence wrong? I don't know if I sentenced this wrong. I improved, however, sensibly in this science, but not sufficiently to follow up any kind of conversation, although I applied my whole mind to the endeavor, for I easily perceived that. Stupid clock platform with a stupid. Okay. This is a very long sentence, so I'm just going to take pauses where I want. I improved, however, sensibly in this science, but not sufficiently to follow up any kind of conversation. Although I applied my whole mind to the endeavor, for which I easily perceived that. Although I eagerly longed to discover myself to the cottagers, I ought not to make the attempt until I had first become master of their language. Which knowledge might enable me to make them overlook the deformity of my figure. For with this, also, the contrast perpetually presented to my eyes had made me acquainted. I had admired the perfect forms of my cottagers, their grace, beauty, and delicate complexions. But how was I terrified when I viewed myself in a transparent pool. At first I started back. unable to believe that it was indeed I who was reflected in the mirror. And when I became fully convinced that I was in reality the monster that I am, I was filled with the bitterest sensations of despondence and mortification. Alas, I did not yet entirely know the fatal effects of this miserable deformity. As the sun became warmer and the light of the day longer, the snow vanished, and I beheld the bare trees and the black earth. From this time, Felix was more employed, and the heart-moving indications of impending famine disappeared. Their food, as I afterwards found, was coarse, but it was wholesome, and they procured a sufficiency of it. Several new kinds of plants sprang up in the garden, which they dressed, and these signs of comfort increased daily as the season advanced. The old man, leaning on his son, walked each day at noon, when it did not rain, as I found it was called, when the heavens poured forth its waters. This frequently took place, but a high wind quickly dried the earth, and the season became far more pleasant than it had been. My mode of life in my hovel was uniform. During the morning I attended the motions of the cottagers, and when they were dispersed in various occupations I slept. The remainder of the day was spent in observing my friends. When they had retired to rest, if there was any moon, or the night was starlight, I went into the woods and collected my own food and fuel for the cottage. When I returned as often as it was necessary, I cleared their path from the snow and performed those offices that I had seen done by Felix. I afterwards found that these labors, performed by an invisible hand, greatly astonished them, and once or twice I heard them utter the words "good spirit," "wonderful," but I did not then understand the significance. But I did not then understand the signification of these terms. My thoughts now became more active, and I longed to discover the motives and feelings of these lovely creatures. I was inquisitive to know why Felix appeared so miserable and Agatha so sad. I thought, foolish.
Drink water. Stop shrimping. Sit up and stretch. Fix your posture. Big stretchies. Big stretch. Big stretch. Good job.
My thoughts now became more active, and I longed to discover the motives and feelings of these lovely creatures. I was inquisitive to know why Felix appeared so miserable, and Agatha so sad. I thought, foolish wretch, that it might be in my power to restore happiness to these deserving people, When I slept or was absent, the forms of the venerable blind father, the gentle Agatha, the excellent Felix flitted before me. I looked upon them as superior beings who would be the arbiters of my future destiny. I formed in my imagination 1,000 pictures presenting myself to them, and their reception of me. I imagined that they would be disgusted, until, by my gentle demeanor and consolating words, I should first win their favor and afterwards their love. These thoughts exhilarated me and led me to apply with fresh ardor to the acquiring the art of language. My organs were indeed harsh, but supple, and although my voice was very unlike the soft music of their tones, yet I pronounced such words as I understood with tolerable ease. It was as the ass and the lapdog, yet surely the gentle ass, whose intentions were affectionate, although his manners were rude, deserved better treatment than blows and execration. The pleasant showers and genial warmth of the spring greatly altered the aspect of the earth. Men who before this change seemed to have hid in caves dispersed themselves and were employed in various arts of cultivation. The birds sang in more cheerful notes. The leaves began to bud forth on the trees. Happy, happy earth, fit habitation for gods, which, so short a time before, was bleak, damp, and unwelcome, and unwholesome. My spirits were elevated by the enchanting appearance of nature. The past was blotted from my memory, the present was tranquil, and the future gilded by bright rays of hope and anticipations of joy.
That is the end of chapter 12. Put a 1 in chat if you are ready for the next chapter. This would be a good opportunity for me to run to the bathroom, huh? Nuke Boss is ready. Cadmium is ready. Happy is ready. I believe Chris said that they were driving, so you better keep your hands on the wheel. Rassilon is ready. Taz is ready. Thank you also so much for the follows. Thank you. Dova is ready. Thank you to the wonderful people on the Clock app for gifting. Thank you, thank you. I appreciate you. I think this would be a good opportunity for me to run to the bathroom, so I will be gone all of a short little break, okay? Don't be scared. I'll be right back.
You didn't have to be scared. I wasn't gone very long. One last drink of water, and then we'll keep reading. Also, if you didn't know, I do record while I am reading, so all of the times that I'm repeating myself, hi unzipped. All of the times that I'm repeating myself, it is because I'm trying to record a good line, so that when you go back and you want to listen to the Frankenstein audiobook that will be on my YouTube channel, you'll get to enjoy the story without any mistakes or interruptions. Of course! Exclamation point hug.
Chapter 13. Now I hasten to the more moving part of my story. I shall relate events that impressed me with feelings which, from what I had been, have made me what I am. Spring advanced rapidly. The weather became fine and the skies cloudless. It surprised me that what before was desert and gloomy should now bloom with the most beautiful flowers and verdure. My senses were gratified and refreshed by 1,000 scents of delight and 1,000 sights of beauty. It was on one of these days when my cottagers periodically rested from their labor. The old man played on his guitar, and the children listened to him, that I observed the countenance of Felix was melancholy beyond expression. He sighed frequently, and once his father paused in his music, and I conjectured by his manner that he inquired the cause of his son's sorrow. Felix replied in a cheerful accent, and the old man was recommencing his music when someone tapped at the door. It was a lady on horseback, accompanied by a countryman as a guide. The lady was dressed in a dark suit and covered with a thick black veil. Agatha asked a question, to which the stranger only replied by pronouncing, in a sweet accent, the name of Felix. Her voice was musical, but unlike that of either of my friends. On hearing this word, Felix came up hastily to the lady, who, when she saw him, threw up her veil, and I beheld a countenance of angelic beauty and expression. Her hair of a shining raven black and curiously braided. Her eyes were dark but gentle, although animated. Her features of irregular proportion and her complexion wondrously fair, each cheek tinged with a lovely pink. Felix seemed ravished with delight when he saw her. Every trait of sorrow vanished from his face, and it instantly expressed a degree of ecstatic joy of which I could have hardly believed it capable. His eyes sparkled, as his cheeks flushed with pleasure, and at that moment I thought him as beautiful as the stranger. She appeared affected by different feelings, wiping a few tears from her lovely eyes. She held out her hand to Felix, who kissed it rapturously and called her, as well as I could distinguish, his sweet Arabian. She did not appear to understand him, but smiled. He assisted her to dismount, and dismissing her guide, conducted her into the cottage. Some conversation took place between him and his father,
and the young stranger knelt at the old man's feet and would have kissed his hand, but he raised her and embraced her affectionately.
I soon perceived that although the stranger uttered articulate sounds and appeared to have a language of her own, she was neither understood by nor herself understood the cottagers. They made many signs which I did not comprehend, but I saw that her presence diffused gladness through the cottage, dispelling their sorrow as the sun dissipates the morning mists. Felix seemed peculiarly happy and with smiles of delight welcomed his Arabian. Agatha, the ever-gentle Agatha, kissed the hands of the lovely stranger and pointing to her brother, made signs which appeared to me to mean that he had been sorrowful until she came. Some hours passed thus, while they, by their countenances, expressed joy, the cause of which I could not comprehend. Presently, I found, by the frequent recurrence of the same sound which the stranger repeated after them, that she was endeavoring to learn their language, and the idea instantly occurred to me that I should make use of the same instruction to the same end. The stranger learned about 20 words at the first lesson. Most of them, indeed, were those which I had before understood, but I profited by the others. As night came on, Agatha and the Arabian retired early. When they separated, Felix kissed the hand of the stranger and said, "Good night, sweet Safi." He sat up much longer, conversing with his father, and by the frequent repetition of her name I conjectured that their lovely guest was the subject of their conversation. I ardently desired to understand them, and bent every faculty towards that purpose, but found it utterly impossible. The next morning, Felix went out to his work, and after the usual occupations of Agatha were finished, the Arabian sat at the feet of the old man, and taking his guitar, played some airs so entrancingly beautiful that they at once drew tears of sorrow and delight from my eyes. She sang, and her voice flowed in a rich cadence, swelling or dying away like a nightingale of the woods. When she had finished, she gave the guitar to Agatha, who at first declined it. She played a simple air, and her voice accompanied it in sweet sounds. But unlike the wondrous strain of the stranger, the old man appeared enraptured and said some words which Agatha endeavored to explain to Safi, and by which he appeared to wish to express that she bestowed on him the greatest delight by her music. The days now passed peacefully as before, with the sole alteration that joy had taken place of sadness in the countenances of my friends. Safi was always gay and happy. She and I improved rapidly in the knowledge of the language. So that in 2 months I began to comprehend most of the words uttered by my protectors. In the meanwhile, also, the black ground was covered with herbage, and the green banks interspersed with innumerable flowers, sweet to the scent and the eyes, stars of pale radiance among the moonlight woods. Stars of pale radiance among the moonlit woods.
Nuke Boss, is there an issue? Is there a problem? Is it broken? Is something wrong? Welcome to our new fishies. Okay, you were just having issues. Okay. I get worried that something breaks on my end. Welcome, my sweet fishies. Thank you for the gift. Thank you for the gift on the clock app. Let me go ahead and run a refresh. Let's see, is there an option to refresh? Reload. There we go. There we go. I knew I wasn't seeing all of it. We are reading Frankenstein. And we are on chapter 13. Apologies. I will continue. There we go.
Stars of pale radiance among the moonlight woods. The sun became warmer, the nights clear and balmy, and my nocturnal rambles were an extreme pleasure to me, although they were considerably shortened by the late setting and early rising of the sun, for I never ventured abroad during daylight, fearful of meeting with the same treatment I had formerly endured in the first village which I had entered. My days were spent in close attention, that I might speedily master the language, and I may boast that I improved more rapidly than the Arabian, who understood very little and conversed in broken accents, whilst I comprehended and could imitate almost every word that was spoken. While I improved in speech, I also learned the science of letters as it was taught to the stranger, and this opened before me a wide field for wonder and delight. The book from which Felix instructed Safi was Volney's Ruins of Empires. I should not have understood the purpose of this book had not Felix, in reading it, given very minute explanations. He had chosen this work, he said, because the
I'm just going to press the button that says declamatory. Ow, my ears. Okay. Deep breath and exhale.
He had chosen this work, he said, because the declamatory style was framed in imitation of the Eastern authors. Through this work, I obtained a cursory knowledge of history and a view of the several empires at present existing in the world. It gave me an insight into the manners, governments, and religions of the different nations of the earth. I heard of the slothful Asiacs. I have not encountered this word before. Slothful Asiacs. I'm not sure how much I like that. I think I said it right.
Hi. Hi, cutie pie. What microphone do I use? I use the Rode NT1A. I did good? Okay.
I heard of the slothful Asiacs, of the stupendous genius and mental activity of the Grecians, of the wars and wonderful virtue of the Romans, of the early Romans, of the subsequent degenerating, of the decline of that mighty empire of chivalry, Christianity, and kings. I heard of the discovery of the American hemisphere and wept with Sapphi over the hapless fate of its original inhabitants. These wonderful narrations inspired me with strange feelings. Was man, indeed, at once so powerful, so virtuous, and magnificent, yet so vicious and base? He appeared at one time a mere scion of the evil principle, at another as all that can be conceived of noble and godlike. To be a great and virtuous man appeared the highest honor that can befell a sensitive being. To be base and vicious, as many on record have been, appeared the lowest degeneration, a condition mere abject than that of the blind mole or harmless worm. For a long time I could not conceive how one man could go forth to murder his fellow. For a long time I could not conceive how one man could go forth to murder his fellow, or even why there were laws and governments. But when I heard details of vice and bloodshed, my wonder ceased, and I turned away with disgust and loathing. Every conversation of the cottagers now opened new wonders to me, while I listened to the instructions which Felix below...
Drink water. I'm actually going to go back just a little bit. Because I feel like I got to repeat this paragraph because we're spitting straight facts here. Hi, Chris. Hi, Taz. You ended up here because you were supposed to be here. You're supposed to be here all along. I'm glad that you guys are enjoying the reading. I'm so happy that you can be here. Big deep breath. Big deep breath. Chris, thank you so much for the gifts. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Why is it just now? Oh, yes. Why is it just now my brain thought of when you flick your tongue like that? Of those goat videos? Yeah, I am a goat. When I mess up in my reading and I make a mistake, I pop my mouth because I need to open my mouth. I need to clear out the bad word, like the mistakes. And then I flick my tongue. I go blah, 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 blah. Because I'm trying to clear the mistake out of my mouth, you know? I'm trying to push away the mistake that I made and just refocus and try saying, you know, the word or phrase or sentence again. Is this new? This is, well, not new as of like the past. I've had this for a month? 2 months? 2 months. 2 months? Close enough. I'm collecting everybody named Chris. I'm gonna repeat this paragraph because we're spitting straight facts. Like we are. Eventually, I will get to Shakespeare. We're Shakespeare in it.
These wonderful narrations inspired me with strange feelings. Was man indeed at once so powerful, so virtuous, so magnificent? So virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base? He appeared at one time a mere scion of the evil principle, and at another as all that can be conceived of noble and godlike. To be a great and virtuous man appeared the highest honor that can befall a sensitive being. To be base and vicious, as many on record have been, appeared to be the lowest degeneration. The lowest degeneration. A condition more abject than that of the blind mole or harmless worm. For a time I could not conceive how one man could go forth to murder his fellow, or even why there were laws and governments. But when I heard details of vice and bloodshed, my wonder ceased, and I turned away with disgust and loathing.
Oh, hi, we have a raid. Hi, Cat. Hi, thank you so much for the raid. How is your stream? How are you? Thank you, thank you. Under the Sea raid. We got more fishies. We got more fishies. Hi, Shepherd. Hi, Tiger. Hi, GT, Alex. I don't know if you prefer GT or Alex, but hello. Welcome. Thank you so much for the raid. If you came along on the raid, and this includes you too, Cat, please do take care of yourself. Drink your water. If you need to step away to get some food, go to the bathroom, go to sleep, do what it is that you need to do. I am here. I'm available. I will continue reading. If you don't know me, my name is Steph. I read books and stories on stream. I have edited readings on YouTube and all of my previous live streams available. Sometimes we do ASMR. Sometimes we play a cozy game. But most of the time, you'll hear me reading. And today we are reading Frankenstein. I haven't updated the bot. I'm sorry. Hello, hello. Thank you so much for the raid. I hope you had a wonderful stream. Please do share what were you up to today. If you're a fishy joining from Cat's stream, what did you enjoy about today's stream? But I am going to continue reading as I am recording for the audiobook.
Every quarter.
Oh, you were reading Pog Champ. That's awesome. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I've heard about that. I don't know. I've only heard the title. I think I've seen the cover. I don't know anything about it. I want to know about it. I want to know about that.
Every conversation of the cottagers now opened new wonders to me. While I listened to the instructions which Felix bestowed upon the Arabian, the strange system of human society was explained to me. I heard of the division of property, of immense wealth and squalid poverty, of rank, descent, and noble blood. The words induced me to turn towards myself. I learned that possessions most esteemed by your fellow creatures were high and unsullied descent, united with riches. I learnt that a man might be respected with only one of these advantages, but without either he was considered, except in very rare instances, as a vagabond and a slave, doomed to waste his powers for the profits of the chosen few. And what was I? Of my creation and creator I was absolutely ignorant. But I knew that I possessed no money, no friends, no kind of property. I was besides endued with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I was not even the same nature as man. I was more agile than they and could subsist upon coarser diet. I bore the extremes of heat and cold with less injury to my frame. My stature far exceeded theirs. When I looked around, I saw and heard of none like me. Was I, then, a monster, a blot upon the earth, from which all men fled, and whom all men disowned? I cannot describe to you the agony that these reflections inflicted upon me. I tried to dispel them, but sorrow only increased with knowledge. Oh, that I had forever remained in my native wood, nor known, nor felt beyond the sensations of hunger, thirst, and heat. Of what a strange nature is knowledge. It clings to the mind when it was once seized. It clings to the mind when it has once seized on it like a lichen on a rock. I wished sometimes to shake off all thought and feeling, but I learned that there was but one means to overcome the sensations of pain, and that was death. A state which I feared yet did not understand. I admired virtue and good feelings, and loved the gentle manners and amiable qualities of my cottagers. But I was shut out from intercourse with them, except through means which I obtained by stealth, when I was unseen and unknown, and which rather increased than satisfied the desire I had of becoming one among my fellows. The gentle words of Agatha and the animated smiles of the charming Arabian were not for me. The mild exhortations of the old man and the lively conversation of the love Felix were not for me. Miserable, unhappy wretch. Otherless,
my tummy is trying to scream. My stomach is making a lot of noise. Thank you for the hydrates. Good morning, Howitzer. Deep breath. And let it out.
Other lessons were impressed upon me even more deeply. I heard of the different sexes and the birth and growth of children, how the father doted on the smiles of the infant, and the lively sallies of the older child, how all life and cares of the mother were wrapped up in the precious charge, how the mind of youth expanded and gained knowledge of brother, sister, and all the various relationships which bind one human being to another in mutual bonds. But where were my friends and relations? No father had watched my infant days, no mother had blessed me with smiles and caresses. Or, if they had, all my life was now a blot, a blind vacancy in which I distinguish nothing. From my earliest remembrance, I had been as I then was in height and proportion. I had never yet seen a being resembling me, or who claimed any intercourse with me. What was I? The question again recurred, to be answered only with groans. I will soon explain to what these feelings tended, but allow me now to return to the cottagers, whose story excited in me such various feelings of indignation, delight, and wonder, but which all terminated in additional love and reverence for my protectors, for so I loved, in an innocent, half-painful self-deceit, to call them.
That is the end of chapter 13. Oh, goodness. Big stretchies. My back is starting to hurt. I'm really glad that we're making so much progress with Frankenstein. And it looks as though the puzzle is nearly done. Would you like me to continue reading? Well, it is nearly the 2-hour mark, and my fishies know that I only stream 2 hours. I will bookmark this page. And let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This next chapter is only 8 pages. I might be able to do that. I don't know that I can do that in the next 9 minutes. I could sleep all night listening to that angelic voice. I have good news for you. I do have a YouTube channel where you can listen to me read to you all night. Can you stay a little longer? Just a little bit? Just a little. Of course. Thank you for the gift. Thank you. All right. But first, if you're ready for the next chapter, put a 1 in chat. let me go ahead and check some things behind the scenes. Okay. All right. It looks like Cadmium is ready. Howitzer is ready. Taurus is ready. Slayoro, Jim, Tempest, Beans. That's a lot of background fish. I love my fishies. I believe there can be up to 200 fishies. Maybe. Taz is ready. I can also set it. I mean, I don't know if I have set it to 1,000, but I can set it to 1,000 fishies. But that means that there has to be 1,000 chatters on the red or purple app. And I don't even think that we get 100 or 200. Hi, Elite. It's good to see you. I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. I'm thinking about getting some ice cream after stream. We're gonna try to read this next chapter and we'll see how it goes. If we can do it. Just a little, just one more. Just one more. What flavor? We'll see. We'll see. The place does like unique blends and custom flavors and stuff. Alright, sip of water. How do you be a fishy? All you have to do is send a message in chat on the red or purple app. Chapter 14.
Some time elapsed before I learned the history of my friends. It was one which could not fail to impress itself deeply on my mind, unfolding as it did a number of circumstances, each interesting and wonderful, to one so utterly inexperienced as I was. The name of the old man was de Lacy. He was descended from a good family in France where he had lived for many years in affluence, respected by his superiors and beloved by his equals. His son was bred in the service of his country, and Agatha had ranked with ladies of the highest distinction. A few months before my arrival, they had lived in a large and luxurious city called Paris, surrounded by friends and possessed of every enjoyment which virtue, refinement, of intellect. Surrounded by friends and possessed of every enjoyment which virtue, refinement of intellect or taste accompanied by moderate fortune, could afford. The father of Safi had been the cause of their ruin. He was a Turkish merchant. And had inhabited Paris for many years, when, for some reason which I could not learn, he became obnoxious to the government. He was seized and cast into prison the very day that Safi arrived from Constantinople to join him. He was tried and condemned to death. The injustice of his sentence was very flagrant. All Paris was indignant, and it was judged that his religion and wealth rather than the crime alleged against him had been the cause of his condemnation. Felix had accidentally been present at the trial. His horror and indignation were uncontrollable when he heard the decision of the court. He made, at that moment, a solemn vow to deliver him and then looked around for the means. After many fruitless attempts to gain admittance to the prison, he found a strongly gated window in an unguarded part of the building, which lighted the dungeon of the unfortunate Mohammedan, who, loaded with chains, waited in despair the execution of the barbarous sentence. Felix visited the grate at night and made known to the prisoner his intentions in his favor. The Turk, amazed and delighted, endeavored to kindle the zeal of his deliverer by promises of reward and wealth. Felix rejected his offers with contempt. Yet when he saw the lovely Safi, who was allowed to visit her father, and who by her gestures expressed her lively gratitude, the youth could not help owning to his own mind that the captive possessed a treasure which would fully reward... Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm like running out of breath. Oh, God. One moment. The youth could not help owning to his own mind that the captive possessed a treasure which would fully reward his toil and hazard. The Turk cried... Ooh, bleh. The Turk quickly perceived the impression that his daughter had made on the heart of Felix and endeavored to secure him more entirely in his interests by the promise of her hand in marriage, so soon as he should be conveyed to a place of safety. Felix was too delicate to accept this offer, yet he looked forward to the probability of the event as to the consummation of his happiness. During the ensuing days, while the preparations were going forward for the escape of the merchant, the zeal of Felix was warmed by several letters that he received from this lovely girl, who found means to express her thoughts in the language of her lover by the aid of an old man, a servant of her father who understood French. She thanked him in the most ardent terms for his intended services towards her parent, and at the same time, she gently deplored her own fate. I have copies of these letters, for I found means during my residence in the hovel to procure the implements of writing, and the letters were often in the hands of Felix or Agatha. Before I depart, I will give them to you. They will prove the truth of my tale, but at present, as the sun is already far declined, I shall only have time to repeat the substance of them to you. Safi related that her mother was a Christian Arab, seized and made a slave by the Turks. Recommended by her beauty, she had won the heart of the father of Safi, who married her. The young girl spoke in high and enthusiastic terms of her mother, who, born in freedom, spurned the bondage to which she was now reduced. She instructed her daughter in the tenets of her religion and taught her to aspire to higher powers of She instructed her daughter to the tenets of her religion and taught her to aspire to higher powers of intellect and an independence of spirit forbidden to the female followers of Muhammad. This lady died, but her lessons were indelibly impressed on the mind of Safi, who sickened at the prospect of again returning to Asia and being enumbered within the walls of a harem, allowed only to occupy herself with infantile amusements, ill-suited to the temper of her soul, now accustomed to grand ideas and a noble emulation for virtue. The prospect of marrying a Christian and remaining in a country where women were allowed to take a rank in society was enchanting to her. The day for the execution of the Turk was fixed, but on the night previous to it, he quitted his prison and before morning was distant many leagues from Paris. Felix had procured passports in the name of his father, sister, and himself. He had previously communicated his plan to the former, who aided the deceit by quitting his house, under the pretense of a journey, and concealed himself with his daughter in an obscure part of Paris. Felix conducted the fugitives through France to Lyons, and across Mount Cenis to Leghorn, where the merchant had decided to wait a favorable opportunity of passing into some part of the Turkish dominions. Safi resolved to remain with her father until the moment of his departure, before which time the Turk renewed his promise that she should be united to his deliverer, and Felix remained with them in expectation of that event. And in the meantime he enjoyed the society of the Arabian, who exhibited towards him the simplest and tenderest affection. They conversed with one another through the means of an interpreter, and sometimes with the interpretation of looks, and Safi sang to him in divine airs of her native country. The Turk allowed this intimacy to take place and encouraged the hopes of the youthful lovers, while in his heart he had formed far other plans. He loathed the idea that his daughter should be united to a Christian, but he feared the resentments of Felix if he should appear lukewarm, for he knew that he was still in the power of his deliverer. If he should choose to betray him to the Italian state which they inhabited. He revolved 1,000 plans by which he should be enabled to prolong the deceit until it be no longer necessary, and secretly take his daughter with him when he departed. His plans were facilitated by the news which arrived from Paris. The government of France were greatly enraged at the escape of their victim and spared no pains to detect and punish his deliverer. The plot of Felix was quickly The plot of Felix was quickly discovered, and Delacy and Agatha were thrown into prison. The news reached Felix and roused him from his dreams of pleasure. His blind and aged father and his gentle sister lay in a noisome dungeon. I haven't seen this word before. Okay. His blind and aged father and his gentle sister lay in a noisome dungeon while he enjoyed the free air and the society of her whom he loved. This idea was torture to him. He quickly arranged with the Turk that if the latter should find a favorable opportunity for escape before Felix could return to Italy, Safi should remain as a boarder at a convent at Leghorn. And then, quitting the lovely Arabian, he hastened to Paris and delivered himself up to the vengeance of the law, hoping to free Delacy and Agatha by this proceeding. He did not succeed. They remained confined for 5 months before the trial took place, the result of which deprived them of their fortune and condemned them to the perpetual exile from their native country. They found a miserable asylum in the cottage in Germany, where I discovered them. Felix soon learned that the treacherous Turk, for whom he and his family endured such unheard-of oppression, on discovering that his deliverer was thus reduced to poverty and ruin, became a traitor to good feeling and honor, and had quitted Italy with his daughter, insultingly sending Felix a pittance of money to aid him, as he said, in some plan of future maintenance. Such were the events that preyed on the heart of Felix and rendered him, when I first saw him, the most miserable of his family. He could have endured poverty, and while this distress had been the meed of his fortune, virtue, he gloried in it. But the ingratitude of the Turk and the loss of his beloved Safi were misfortunes more bitter and irreparable. Why can't I speak? And the loss of his beloved Safi were misfortunes more bitter and irreparable. The arrival of the Arabian now infused new life into his soul. When the news reached Leghorn that Felix was deprived of his wealth and rank, the merchant commanded his daughter to think no more of her lover, but to prepare to return to her native country. The generous nature of Safi was outraged by this command. She attempted to expostulate with her father, and he left her angrily, reiterating his tyrannical mandate. A few days after, the Turk entered his daughter's apartment and told her hastily that he had reason to believe that his residence at Leghorn had been divulged, and that he should speedily be delivered to the French government. He had consequently hired a vessel to convey him to Constantinople, for which the city he should he had consequence He had consequently hired a vessel to convey him to Constantinople, for which city he should sail in a few hours. He intended to leave his daughter under the care of a confidential servant, to follow at her leisure with the greater part of his property, which had not yet arrived at Leghorn. When alone, Safi resolved in her own mind the plan of conduct that it would become her to pursue in this emergency. A residence in Turkey was abhorrent to her. Her religion and her feelings were alike averse to it. By some papers of her father which fell into her hands, she heard of the exile of her lover and learnt the name of the spot where he then resided. She hesitated some time, but at length she formed her determination. Taking with her some jewels that belonged to her and a sum of money, she quitted to Italy with an attendant, a native of Longhorn, but who understood the common language of Turkey, and departed for Germany. She arrived in safety at a town about 20 leagues from the cottage of De Lacy, when her attendant fell dangerously ill. Safi nursed her with the most devoted affections.
I said the whole sentence wrong.
She arrived safely at a town about 20 leagues from the cottage of De Lacy, when her attendant fell dangerously ill. Safi nursed her with the most devoted affection, but the poor girl died, and the Arabian was left alone, unacquainted with the language of the country and utterly ignorant of the customs of the world. She fell, however, into good hands. The Italian had mentioned the name of the spot for which they were bound, and after her death, the woman of the house in which they had lived took care that Safi should arrive in safety at the cottage of her lover.
That will be the end of today's stream. Thank you so much for listening to me read. Thank you so much to our puzzlers for puzzling away while I read to you. And thank you so much to all of our fishies, no matter what platform you're on. I appreciate you listening, and if you enjoyed listening, please consider following and checking out my other platforms. I am streaming simultaneously to you across the red, purple, and clock platform. So if there is another platform that you enjoy using or that you would want to be notified for, hey, would you know it? I also have a Discord server. Join me and a lot of other fishies in our Discord server, where you will be notified whenever the live stream begins. You can also be notified, if you choose, of any videos that get posted on any platform. We also chat together and stuff. If you're not already in the Discord server, I highly recommend and suggest joining the Discord server. If you're not already on the Red app, I also suggest going to that platform and checking out any of my previous live streams going all the way back to 2024. Or you can watch the edited audiobooks available to you. But if you are watching on either the Red or the Clock platform, the stream is just going to end for you. But if you are watching on the Purple platform, we are going to raid out, ! Raid. Copy the raid message. Yes, the most recent video to be posted, the most recent audiobook to be posted is The Wizard of Oz, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. I have all of my videos in playlist form, so you can enjoy listening to my voice in any form. I do take suggestions of books, but do note, due to copyright, I likely can't read it. So, if it is a public domain, classical book, yeah, I can read that. If it is not, I have to go ask the author if I can read it. And then, all of that. But anyhow, now that I have read you your bedtime story and tucked you in and you've fallen asleep, this is the part where we say our good nights, our goodbyes, and our see you tomorrows. I will be back again tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Time Zone with more Frankenstein. It will be the last stream that we have this week. So, I highly encourage you to join. But if not, you can always find my videos available on the internet. It was great seeing you all again, and thank you so much for all of the gifts, the follows, the shares, the likes, and the hydrates. Kat, thank you so much for bringing us some more fishies to hang out. And lastly, don't forget to drink your water, eat your food, be kind to yourself and others. Happy Men's Mental Awareness Month, and Happy Pride! Happy Pride Month. Love each other. It's okay to not be okay. Have a good night.